Snow drifted across the landing pad in ragged sheets as the transport's ramp lowered, and Sergeant Cole Harlow stepped into the glare of Varan 6's frozen daylight. His boots sank slightly into the pale crust, but his movements remained measured, almost deliberate, as if the cold itself were an opponent he had learned to read. A cluster of Concord officers waited for him, their tall, angular silhouettes shivering despite insulated exosuits designed for harsher temperatures than Earth specialists routinely endured. They exchanged uncertain glances, trying to reconcile the human before them with their shared belief that his species lacked the finesse required for precision warfare. Cole gave them a curt nod. He carried no bravado. His calm, steady presence was all the introduction they would receive. The officers hesitated before stepping forward, led by Commander Aresh, whose translucent skin pulsed faintly with agitation. Aresh studied Cole's face as if searching for hidden equipment. "You are the ground-level perception analyst," Aresh asked, as though the title might crumble with misuse. "Sergeant Harlow works," Cole replied. Aresh's pulse dimmed slightly. "Then allow me to brief you. Our forward outpost sits in a canyon 20 kilometers north. It was seized 3 days ago by a rogue detachment of the Dominion Fracture. Their commander has installed energy barriers that disrupt our targeting systems. Our drones fail, our marksmen miss, and every attempt to advance ends in casualties." Cole listened without interruption. The wind stung his cheeks, yet he kept his gaze on the commander, gathering details with a quiet intensity. Aresh continued, "Our analysts insist the terrain is impossible for infiltration. The storm's warp sensors and the magnetic interference shreds energy fire. We requested assistance from Earth because your people are accustomed to manual methods." The implication hung in the frigid air. Cole had heard variations of the same sentiment since the mission began. Humans were improvisational, erratic, ill-suited for the clean precision expected in galactic conflict. He had no interest in arguing. Results would speak more clearly than he ever could. "Show me the approach," he said. The officers led him into the command shelter, a dim chamber humming with heat coils. Holographic terrain maps flickered above the central table, their shifting blue shadows painting the room in cold light. The outpost appeared as a cluster of geometric shapes nestled between serrated cliffs. Snowstorms rolled across the image like slow, grinding waves. Cole studied the map, tracing the ridgelines with his eyes, then with the faint glide of a gloved finger. Aresh watched him. "You intend to cross that distance alone?" "I intend to see what your systems can't." The commander tilted his head, uncertain whether to be impressed or alarmed. The Dominion commander is highly protected. Even if you reach a vantage point, penetrating his shield will require perfect timing. Cole gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. "Then I'll time it." Silence settled over the chamber, broken only by the whisper of the wind against the shelter walls. For the first time, Aresh looked at Cole not with skepticism, but with the faint stirrings of hope. The human's composed certainty carried a weight no data projection could match. "Very well," Aresh said quietly. "We will monitor your progress until the storms interfere. After that, you will be on your own." "I'm used to that," Cole said. He turned back toward the ramp, the cold rushing in again as the doors opened. The officers followed him with their eyes, realizing, perhaps for the first time, that the figure moving through the storm did not fit their expectations at all, and all fell to him. The storm intensified as Cole moved away from the shelter, each gust pushing needles of snow against his hood, but he welcomed the resistance. It grounded him, sharpened his focus, reminded him that this landscape played no favorites. Varan 6 demanded precision from every living thing that trespassed across its frozen skin, and Cole intended to demonstrate he could meet that demand. He stopped behind a jagged outcrop and knelt, unfastening the clips along his pack with practiced ease. His rifle emerged like an extension of his own will, its metal already gathering a crust of frost. He brushed it away with the back of his glove, noting how the wind curled from the east, steady and low, like breath drawn through clenched teeth. He adjusted the scope, testing its clarity, then angled the suppressor to ensure it wouldn't ice over too quickly. Experience had taught him that cold could warp even the finest engineering, but small corrections made the difference between a clean strike and a pointless risk. He checked the magazine, its weight familiar and reassuring, then secured it with a soft click. Everything he did, the tilt of his head, the tension in his arm, reflected years of refining his instincts until they felt less like decisions and more like natural impulses rising at the precise moment he needed them. He lowered himself to the snow, chest pressed against the ground, and began to crawl. His movements were slow, nearly imperceptible, each shift of his limbs calculated to blend with the rhythm of the storm. Snow gathered on his camo suit, transforming him into a pale shape barely distinct from the terrain. Visibility was terrible, but Cole didn't rely on sight alone. The faint tremors beneath the crust told him the wind's direction, the temperature drop, and the distant hum of machinery carried through the ice. What the Concord officers dismissed as guesswork was, to him, a language more articulate than any display screen. He progressed meter by meter across a series of shallow ridges, always keeping his profile low, always gauging the path ahead. The outpost remained miles beyond the horizon, yet he felt its presence in the thin, metallic taste creeping into the air, evidence of Dominion energy fields flexing against the storm. He paused beside a slab of frozen stone and raised his head just enough to scan the expanse. No drones yet. Good. Their initial absence meant the Dominion still trusted their interference barriers more than traditional patrol oversight. That would not last long. Cole pressed forward, each motion reducing the distance between him and the canyon where the enemy forces maintained their hold. The cold pressed harder, seeking cracks in his mask or gloves, but he ignored the sting. Endurance was a skill as vital as aim, one honed during nights on Earth's mountains where the slightest lapse could invite frostbite or worse. He let his breath steady, slow enough not to plume visibly in the wind, deep enough to keep his muscles from stiffening. Hours crawled past him as he crawled past the landscape. At last he reached the crest of a long, sloping ridge overlooking the canyon approach. A faint glow marked the Dominion barricades ahead, pulsing with irregular energy ripples. He settled behind a mound of snow and allowed his body to absorb the terrain's contours. Everything he had anticipated, shield distortions, static interference, confirmed itself in the air's tension. He raised his scope, not to fire but to watch. Enemy silhouettes moved around the barriers with a rigid efficiency, their armor gleaming dimly beneath the storm's haze. Cole tracked each step, each rotation, storing the patterns in his mind. He wasn't ready to strike. Gathering knowledge was its own quiet power. As he lowered the rifle, a certainty settled over him. The Dominion commander was somewhere inside this chaos, protected by technology designed to repel every kind of precision, except the kind that came from instinct, patience, and a human's stubborn refusal to yield to the impossible. Cole exhaled slowly, anchoring himself to the snow, knowing the next decisions he made would determine not only his survival, but the outcome of a conflict the Concord had already deemed unwinnable. Snow hissed softly as Cole steadied his breath, letting the storm's rhythm fold around him until his presence became indistinguishable from the drifting white. He lay prone against the ledge, rifle braced on a narrow slab of ice that vibrated faintly with each gust. The Dominion outpost crouched in the canyon below, an angular fortress of dark plating and shifting lights, and its spires carved stark silhouettes against the swirling blue haze. Cole's visor registered none of the usual targeting indicators. The interference turned every digital aid into useless static. But his eyes, honed through years of patient refinement, parsed the landscape with unwavering precision. Each movement, each gleam, each ripple of displaced snow entered his awareness like quiet notes in an intricate score. He adjusted his grip with practiced subtlety, mindful of the way cold stiffened both metal and muscle. The rifle's barrel, frosted with crystalline buildup, extended toward the canyon floor, where Dominion soldiers marched in short, urgent strides. Their armored boots crushed the snow into granular shards that reflected pale light. Cole noted their pacing, their rotations, and the cadence of their helmet comms that traveled faintly through the storm. All of it pieced together the rhythm of their vigilance. Yet his attention centered on one figure, the commander, who emerged from the fortress with deliberate steps and a manner suggesting he believed himself untouchable. A shimmering field enveloped him, its oscillations faint but unmistakable, like heat mirages across icy plains. Cole exhaled slowly and allowed his heartbeat to settle. He'd studied these shield types in briefings. Those simulations lacked the unpredictable distortions of a frozen battlefield. The commander's shield pulsed in cycles, thinning at one precise interval when its generator recalibrated. The window was brief, barely the span of a blink, but consistent enough to exploit. Cole watched 3 cycles, then 5, confirming the pattern while adjusting for wind shear and magnetic flicker. A shot taken too soon would ricochet off the barrier. A shot taken too late would vanish into the canyon's storm-warped air. Timing mattered more than the bullet's design. The round itself remained simple alloy, but precision could elevate simplicity into something extraordinary. As Cole continued observing, the storm intensified without warning, sweeping dense flurries across the cliffside. Visibility narrowed to a shifting veil of white, yet he remained unfazed. He closed his eyes momentarily, recalling the commander's position from memory, then reopened them to re-engage with the blurred world. The aliens in the distant shelter would be watching his biosigns with growing confusion, unable to understand how a human could function when every tool they relied upon had become compromised. Cole's strength had never come from technology. It came from a lifetime of training himself to see order in chaos. He let his final breath flow out, light as frost. The shield cycle flickered. His finger tightened on the trigger with controlled resolve. The rifle barked once, a muted thunder swallowed by the storm. For a moment, nothing stirred. The bullet cut through the tempest, drifting a hair's breadth wider than anticipated, then correcting as wind shifted. It reached the commander just as the shield dipped into its vulnerable trough. The impact blossomed silently, dropping the armored figure onto the snow without dramatic flourish, only finality. Shouts erupted below as Dominion soldiers scrambled, their formation collapsing into frantic disarray. Cole immediately rolled to a concealment pocket behind a jagged spur of ice, knowing drones would soon saturate the area with scan sweeps. He advanced sideways along the ridge, taking brief, calculated shots that disabled sensors and fractured communication arrays. Each pull of the trigger was deliberate, each ricochet intentional, steering the battlefield into growing confusion. As alarms echoed through the canyon, Cole paused behind a snow-laden boulder and reassessed the shifting situation. The enemy was destabilized, their coordination unraveling in real time. He could feel the turning point settling over the battlefield, subtle, undeniable, and earned through discipline rather than spectacle. The storm howled around him, yet beneath its roar lay a deepening certainty. The path to the outpost's liberation had opened, and the next steps would demand the same unrelenting focus that had carried him this far. Snow gusted across the shattered canyon as the final echoes of combat faded into the frozen distance, leaving the air strangely hollow, as though the planet itself were exhaling after holding its breath too long. Cole remained at the ridge for several seconds, studying the quieted outpost below. The Dominion's presence had collapsed the moment their commander fell, and the few surviving rebels had fled into the storm rather than attempt a last stand. Now only drifting ice moved across the structures they had once fortified so confidently. Cole lowered his rifle, exhaling slowly, letting the tension slip from his shoulders in measured increments. The battle had ended, but the implications were only beginning, and he felt the weight of that reality settle into the cold around him. As he descended toward the outpost, he noticed how the snow bore almost no trace of the fight, as though the world sought to cover any evidence of his presence. The thought made him smile faintly. It suited him. He preferred to leave as small a mark as possible, even when the results of his actions rippled far beyond his reach. At the outpost entrance, Concord soldiers waited, some of them still visibly shaken. When they spotted him, their expressions shifted from disbelief to something like reverence. He nodded in greeting, unwilling to let their awe linger too long. They opened a path for him, stepping aside with almost ritualistic caution, which only heightened his discomfort. Inside, Commander Aresh approached with a gait that betrayed a mixture of relief and bewilderment. His luminous skin flickered with conflicting emotions as he took in the humans standing before him, snow-dusted and calm, as if he had returned from an ordinary patrol. "We recovered the shield data," Aresh said quietly. "It appears your timing was accurate within a margin our analysts consider improbable." Cole removed one glove, rubbing warmth into his fingers. "All that matters is the outpost is yours again." "Because of you," Aresh replied. "This outcome will reshape our assessments of human capability." Cole didn't respond immediately. He understood what the commander meant, and he recognized the tremor of caution beneath the praise. The Concord had never truly known humanity. They had relied on reports, statistics, and outdated assumptions. Only now were they forced to reckon with a truth Cole had learned long ago. People were unpredictable, adaptable, and far more resilient than comfortable observers liked to believe. "Your analysts will adjust," he said simply. Aresh studied him, then offered a slow nod. "There will be questions, requests. Many will want access to your methods." "That's fine," Cole answered, though he knew most of what he did could never be translated into alien metrics. Some instincts were not teachable. They were inherited through generations of struggle, refined through harsh landscapes, honed by imperfect tools and relentless necessity. His people didn't need enhancements to read wind or snow. They had learned by surviving them. The commander stepped back, giving him space. "Transport ships are en route. You'll return to Earth soon." Cole felt a quiet relief at the thought of home. Mountains without magnetic storms, snow that carried familiar scents, silence unmarred by distant artillery. Yet he also sensed the shift this mission had triggered, a subtle reorientation of the galaxy's gaze toward Earth. He doubted humanity was prepared for the sudden attention, but he also knew they would rise to whatever challenge followed. They always did. When he stepped outside again, the storm had eased, revealing a sky of pale brilliance stretching over the white expanse. Cole stood for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the cold settle into his lungs like an old memory. He knew he would return to this kind of terrain one day, not because anyone demanded it, but because the quiet clarity of places like this suited him. As the transport's lights appeared through the thinning snowfall, he turned toward them with steady purpose, leaving the canyon behind without ceremony. The galaxy would remember this place, but Cole had already moved on.